I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to episode 141 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. We have a visit today with Leslie Rule.
Leslie Rule is an artist, photographer, and author. She was born on a dark and stormy night in Seattle, Washington, and has lived in the Northwest most of her life. A veteran author for over 3 decades, Rule's works include 2 suspense novels and 5 nonfiction books on the paranormal, including Coast to Coast Ghosts, True Stories of Hauntings Across America. Rule was only 17 when she started attending murder trials with her mother, author Ann Rule. Quote, "It was my job to shoot the killers, not with a gun, but with a camera," says Leslie. Many of her courtroom photographs have appeared in her mother's books. Leslie Rule's true crime debut, A Tangled Web, covers a frightening Omaha love triangle murder. Leslie says she chose this case because she wants to warn readers that the female sadistic sociopath may be the most dangerous killer of all. A Tangled Web. It was a bleak November in 2012 when Cari Lea Farver vanished from Omaha, Nebraska. Cari, 37, was a devoted mother, reliable employee, and loyal friend, not the type to shirk responsibilities, abandon her son, and run off on an adventure while her dying father took his last breaths. Yet the many texts from her phone indicated she had done just that. It appeared that Cari had dumped her new boyfriend, quit her job, and relinquished custody of her son to her mother, all by text. While Cari's boyfriend, Dave Krupa, and her supervisor were bewildered by her abrupt disappearance, they accepted the text at face value. Her mother, Nancy Rainey, however, was alarmed and reported Cari missing. Police were skeptical of her claims that a cyber imposter had commandeered her daughter's phone and online identity. While Nancy was afraid for Cari, Dave Krupa was growing afraid of her, for he believed Cari was stalking him. Never seen or heard, the stalker was aware of his every move and seemed obsessed by his casual girlfriend, Shanna Liz Goliard, often calling her a fat whore, in the 12,000 emails and texts he received in a disturbing 3-year deluge. With mesmerizing detail and compelling narrative skill, Leslie Rule tracks every step of the heart-pounding path to long-awaited justice. From a sociopath's twisted past to the deadly deception and the high-tech forensics that condemned the killer to prison, where the tangled web of manipulations still draws trusting souls into danger.
I'd like to welcome Leslie Rule to the program. She is the daughter of Ann Rule. She is the apple that did not fall far from the tree, and she has a fascinating book, and it's called The Tangled Web. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks for having me.
Like Ann mentioned, the apple definitely didn't fall far from that tree. You have both channeled your mother in this book, but also giving it your own style. What made you decide that this case was the one you wanted to jump into the true crime arena?
I was drawn to this case for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to warn people about how dangerous females can be because it's too easy for us to forget that. And I also wanted to warn people about the dangers on the internet. There's all kinds of crimes being committed every day on the web. And if we could just learn some of the tricks that the predators are using, then we can protect ourselves. So it was my goal to find a fascinating case and also to warn readers about some of the dangers they might not be paying attention to.
Shanna Goliard was savvy to a myriad of ways to be incognito on the internet. Is there any movement to make some of these illegal?
Yes. Now, there are laws. Fortunately, some of the apps that predators use are legal because they can be used legitimately. For instance, VPNs, virtual private networks. You can hide your location by using a VPN. And this is something that the killer in this book did. But there are also good reasons for people to use VPNs, perfectly legitimate reasons. For some, they might be tired of being targeted by advertisers. And it's also a good way to protect your privacy to keep you safe. So even with some laws in place that make it illegal for people to, for instance, lie about who they are on the web, it actually doesn't help that much because it's too easy to get away with these kinds of crimes. So we have to be alert. We have to make sure we have our privacy settings, for instance, on Facebook, set so that our pages aren't wide open for the whole world to see.
Absolutely. The internet is a good thing. It's not an evil thing. It all depends on how you use it.
Right.
And for young people, well, not even just young people, anybody can fall victim to this stuff.
We're all really vulnerable, especially because computers are still pretty new. There's so many different tricks that people can pull on the web that we're not aware of. One of the things I tried to do with this story is mention some of those things, those apps, for instance, that the killer used in this book. One app that helped her get away with her crimes is called Letter Me Later. She was able to send herself emails hours ahead of time, days ahead of time, to arrive at a certain time. So it looked like she was being stalked. She'd be with her boyfriend and they would suddenly both get an email from the stalker. He told me this is how she managed to fool him, because he thought it was coming from someone else. I didn't know such a thing existed. Did you?
No.
No, because I've never needed anything like that.
Well, the other one is the one that you can change your name to anything you want, even if it's a real person. Just take over their whole identity. It's just,
And so when we're on the web, we can never really be sure who we're speaking to. So if you're on Facebook, it's so easy for people to clone someone's Facebook page and pretend to be you and send messages to your friends and try to scam them. It's usually not because they're planning to kill somebody, but usually so they can get a few dollars out of them.
Yeah, I've heard horror stories.
Yep.
Trouble, I need money.
Yep.
Just send it right along.
My dad died in 1975, but somehow he was managing to send messages to some of my Facebook friends saying that he was stuck somewhere and needed to borrow some money. So that was kind of interesting that he was able to do that despite the fact he's been gone all these years. Yeah.
Or he's gone.
So when you get a message on Facebook, never assume it's who it's supposed to be, even if the picture is there. Just be very careful about clicking on links. Even if you think your friend is sending you a link, don't click on it unless you can be absolutely sure it's your friend.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of computers, there's a whole nother dimension out there, online dating. We've heard other cautionary tales in that arena. Do you know from your research of any ways that people can protect themselves?
Yes, actually, it's really important when you're going on a date, somebody you don't know, that you meet in a public place. Some people will actually, they meet somebody for coffee and they'll take a picture of the license plate on their new friend's car and they text it to their friends. Just in case something should happen to them, their friends will have a good lead to give to the police. That's never a bad idea, but it can be dangerous for both males and females. The people that you meet on the web, in general, are no more dangerous than the people you would meet organically. Like if you ran into somebody at the grocery store and started chatting, that person could be a serial killer. The person you meet on the web could be. So what you need to do is really protect your privacy. Don't give out addresses and personal information until you can vet them. Meet in a public place. Make sure your friends know where you're going. Use caution and don't go off with somebody on the first date. Stay in a public place.
I totally agree. Actually, this was something we were going to talk about later, but I actually met my husband online. It wasn't a dating site or anything. It was just a message board. And we did all the stuff to keep us safe. I didn't even use my real name.
Oh,
until I got to know him, and we talked on the phone for probably 3 months. I wanted to know who I was dealing with and if he
right.
was willing to keep talking to me for 3 months. And we met in a public place, and
Good.
we've been together for 23 years. So,
And
Now,
the odd thing is that his family still calls her by that name. They don't.
yeah, they do.
well, that was smart. You really can't know anybody until you've known them for a while.
That's true. Sometimes people you know for a long time turn out to be.
They can be. They can. That we have to be so careful, but we just have to pay attention to our gut feelings.
Right. Most of your writing career has revolved around the paranormal, both fiction and nonfiction. Did you come across anything paranormal involved in any of your mother's true crime research?
Quite a bit. 4 ghost books I wrote, my mom wrote the foreword on each one. And she told about some experiences she had. And she also talked about some of the experiences that the people in her books had. For instance, there was a little girl, 13 years old. Her name was Jana. A few years back, she disappeared. It was around Christmas time. Her friends had asked her to come to their trailer and water the plants while they were out of town. She was happy to help. But unfortunately, she had to walk through the woods to get to their house. She set off in the woods, told her mom she'd be back in a little while, and she never returned. And she'd actually been murdered, but no one knew that for a long time because she wasn't found for quite a while. In her mother's apartment, they would often hear a sharp rap on the door, and they would go open the door, nobody there. And then one day, a family friend by the name of Linda was in the bathroom, and she was combing her hair and looking at herself in the mirror. And then suddenly a face appeared behind her. And she had never met Jana, but she recognized her from her photos. And she felt like the message from Jana was, come and find me. She was eventually found. Her skull appeared in a spot in the woods where people had searched, where it had not been before, as if someone had just set it there. When detectives approached the caregiver of the trailer park where her friend lived, he committed suicide. So they figured he was the killer. Nobody knows for sure. We see this frequently in cases of murder where justice hasn't been served or people haven't been found. So it's very common. And my mom heard a lot of stories from people, and a lot of times she didn't put it in the book because people maybe didn't want that shared. But yes, definitely come across paranormal when researching true crime.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, now that you've got both the paranormal and the true crime, what do you find is easiest to research?
Writing the ghost books was so easy, partly because each book had about 50 short stories, and it was lighter. It was lighter research. I stayed away from places that had reputations for being really evil, stayed away from stuff that where demons were supposedly involved. Didn't research that at all. My ghost stories were mostly pretty light, pretty benign spirits. It was really fun to do that research. Writing a true crime book is the hardest writing I've ever done. If there was a lot of information to absorb, and I wanted to be sure I got it right, and that all the good people would be happy with the finished result. I was kind of nervous because I really wanted to get it right. But it turned out, thanks to the help of all the people I interviewed, they were so good about sharing, that it did turn out pretty good. I don't know if I want to do another true crime book, though, because it was a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of pressure. Plus, I really felt for the victim. I really felt for her and her family. It was kind of a painful process. I'm really glad I did it, though. If the right case comes along, then I will write another. But I'm enjoying taking a break right now.
Well, it's been 20 years since you've written any fiction. True crime and the paranormal, there's a lot of inspiration to draw on. Do you think you'll write any more fiction in the future?
I love to write fiction, and even though I haven't published any fiction, I have actually written some, and I'm working on a series for kids, probably between the ages of 7 and 10. It's a fantasy series, and I've got one book done. I haven't approached a publisher yet, but it's a fun, lighthearted story. I'm having a blast. I just love doing this kind of writing.
Good.
Oh, good, good. Back to our lovely tale. This book, as I'm reading it, I kept thinking about my own digital footprint. How does this aspect change the way crimes of this nature are investigated and reported upon?
Well, today, investigators actually have a big advantage because killers are easier to trace. For one thing, there are video cameras everywhere. because video cameras are now pretty cheap. So it's really hard for someone to flee the scene of a crime without getting caught on camera somewhere. And then there is the pinging of the cell phones. They can trace somebody's movements very easily if the killer had their cell phone nearby while